A woman camping alone in the Arizona desert thought she found the perfect place to spend the night until a stranger appeared, then returned with a chilling warning about someone allegedly watching her through binoculars. What happened next left her questioning everything. These are the kinds of real-life moments we'll be exploring in today's countdown of the 6 most disturbing van camping encounters caught on camera. Egged in the dead of the night. What should have been a peaceful escape into the countryside turned into one of the most unsettling nights Brendan had ever experienced in his years of camping. Brendan set out for a solo overnight trip in the Shropshire Hills, hoping to reconnect with the area where many of his early camping adventures began. He was traveling in his self-converted ambulance camper and wanted nothing more than a quiet evening surrounded by nature.
Alrighty, let's hit the road. The next stop, the bog mine, Minsterley.
Continue on A488 for 5 miles.
So where we're staying tonight isn't too far from a place called Bishop's Castle. And when I've been to Bury Ditches before, I've gone into Bishop's Castle and got a few ingredients for dinner, but we've got ingredients for dinner tonight. But the road to Bishop's Castle from Shrewsbury, for any fellow Salopians watching, you'll know this already, the road is notoriously bad. So I'm hoping that Shropshire Council have done some repairs, but that's very, very unlikely. The roads in Shropshire of late have gone, well, to pot. They've gone to pot. Yeah, it's hardly a road in Shrewsbury at the moment. It hasn't got huge craters of potholes. The higher we're heading up into the hills, the more likely it's looking that it's going to rain. In fact, it does look like it's raining over there.
The plan sounded simple. Take a scenic walk, enjoy a homemade dinner, watch the sunset, and spend the night in a remote woodland parking area known as Bury Ditches. But nature had other ideas. A thick blanket of fog swallowed the landscape.
Please excuse my huffing and puffing, but what we should be seeing right now, ladies and gentlemen, to the left of us, is the lovely sprawling hills of Shropshire, but we're not seeing that. One of the main reasons for doing this particular walk was to get to, where is it? That point right there, the mountain view. Let's see some of these beautiful summer photos, shall we? Or maybe not, if we've got no signal. It's all going to plan as usual. Oh my god, you can just see from that little tiny thumbnail there that there's some kind of view about an half hour's walk away, but it is absolutely pointless.
The famous views he had driven there to see were completely hidden. Every trail looked the same. Every viewpoint revealed nothing but mist. Even the silence felt unusual. Still, Brendan pushed on. If the scenery would not cooperate, at least the camping side of the trip could. Unfortunately, that did not go according to plan either. After reaching the overnight location, another problem appeared. His diesel heater suddenly stopped working.
And a nice, warm diesel heater. Why hasn't... Huh. Interesting. Let's try one more time for good luck. Shit. You couldn't write it. Oh. Have I got enough to stay warm tonight? Right.
Temperatures were dropping fast, and what should have been a comfortable evening inside the van quickly became a cold endurance test. Now he was dealing with no views, no heat, and a growing sense that the trip simply was not meant to work out. The only bright spot was dinner. He cooked a hearty meal inside the van, toasted his wraps, and tried to salvage the experience. For a while, it seemed like things might settle down. Then darkness arrived. The parking area emptied. Other visitors disappeared.
Well, it's well and truly pitch black now. No one else in the car park. We're all alone. So I think it's time to get the curtains closed. I've got my coat on because it's so blooming cold in here. And I hope I'm going to be warm enough in that bed tonight. I do hope. It's, colder up in the hills. I think it's about 8 degrees in Shrewsbury. It's got to be touching 4 degrees here at the moment. As soon as the sun goes, as soon as the light goes, temperatures just drop drastically.
Soon, Brendan was completely alone, or so he thought. Late in the evening, a vehicle arrived nearby. He could hear laughter and loud voices coming from outside. The sound carried through the darkness and immediately broke the peaceful atmosphere he'd been hoping for.
White Park, right next to me. I heard what sounded like teenagers laughing and giggling before. I was just about to get into bed. Flipping rave at Bury Ditches. Oh my god. I'm going to give it 10 minutes and hopefully they're just smoking whatever and then just going to pee off. Thank God for that. They've gone. Oh, that was just going to turn an already bad night into an even worse night. The only thing that's been good tonight is the dinner.
The group eventually left. Relieved, Brendan prepared for bed. The difficult day was finally over. Except it was not. Just after midnight, a sudden noise jolted him awake. A vehicle had pulled up outside the van. Within moments, something slammed into the side of the camper. The impact was loud enough to trigger instant panic. Brendan shot upright in bed, confused and disoriented. In the darkness, he scrambled for his light and keys, trying to figure out what had just happened.
Just had someone pull up outside the van. What the was that? Where's the light? Right, I think they've just driven off. Where the hell are my keys? Right, flipping midnight.
When he finally assessed the situation, the answer was almost unbelievable.
Oh my god. Have they done anything else? Just pelted eggs at the side of the van. This is one of those moments where I would just put the camera down and go home. Right, they've sped off. But before there's chance for them to come back and do anything else, I'm going to leave this spot.
Someone had thrown eggs at the van. To some people, that might sound like a harmless prank. Think about how you would react in that situation. You're asleep, miles from anywhere, and then you're jolted awake by something hitting your van. The first few seconds must be terrifying because you simply don't know what's happening outside. Is somebody messing around? Are they trying to damage the vehicle? Are they targeting you specifically? Those unanswered questions are what made this encounter so disturbing. And from Brendan's perspective, the possibility that the same group from earlier had returned only added another layer of concern. According to him, he even thought he heard someone say his name before the attack. If that was true, it raised an uncomfortable question. Had they specifically come back for him? Rather than wait and find out, Brendan made a decision immediately. He packed up and left. There would be no second chances and no staying until the morning. The risk was simply not worth it. Shortly after 1 a.m, he abandoned the campsite entirely and drove home. The following day revealed the physical evidence.
Well, it's safe to say I did not have the best night's sleep last night. Oh, God. I got back home, it's gone 1 o'clock in the morning. My eyes feel red raw. Just couldn't stop thinking about that last night. Has it gone in the sliding rail? It's all dripped down there. I don't think egg does long-term damage to paintwork, does it?
Egg residue covered parts of the van and had dripped down the bodywork. Thankfully, the damage appeared minor. The bigger impact was psychological. Out of hundreds of camping trips over several years, Brendan could count his genuinely bad experiences on one hand. That is precisely why this incident stood out. It wasn't the eggs themselves that made the story memorable. It was the feeling of vulnerability. One moment, he was asleep in a quiet woodland parking area. The next, he was wondering who was outside his van and what they might do next. Sometimes the most disturbing camping encounters are not the ones that cause serious damage. They're the ones that leave you staring into the darkness, asking yourself a simple question. What would have happened if those people had decided to stay? One peaceful camping trip nearly turned into a tragedy when a couple woke up to find their campsite catching fire in broad daylight. The couple had arrived at a beautiful waterfront location in their camper van and quickly settled into camp. The atmosphere was relaxed. They set up a large tent beside the van, unloaded their gear, and spent the afternoon enjoying the outdoors. There were no warning signs. They went fishing, explored the shoreline, admired the scenery, and even caught a small fish. The day felt like the kind of adventure every camper hopes for. The only challenge was the weather. Strong winds battered the campsite for hours, making it difficult to stay comfortable outside. As evening arrived, they built a fire, cooked a hearty meal, and laughed about the freezing temperatures. Despite the relentless wind, spirits remained high. The campsite looked perfect. Dinner was a success. Hot potatoes, sausages, tea, and warm conversation helped them forget about the cold. Eventually, they zipped themselves into their sleeping bags and called it a night. Nothing seemed out of place. The following morning began just as peacefully. Birds chirped around the campsite. The couple prepared breakfast and discussed their plans for more fishing. It looked like another ordinary day in nature. Then everything changed in seconds. One of them suddenly noticed something alarming: smoke. A moment later came the terrifying realization: the tent was on fire. Panic erupted instantly. Breakfast was abandoned. Camping gear was thrown aside. Their attention shifted completely to stopping the flames before they spread. The fire appeared near the rear section of the tent, close to electrical equipment connected to their setup. Within moments, flames were climbing through fabric and consuming anything nearby. The couple rushed into action. One grabbed the fire extinguisher while the other searched desperately for water. Every second mattered. If the blaze reached certain equipment, the consequences could become much more serious. That possibility created the most frightening moment of the entire incident. Inside the tent were power components, batteries, and fuel-related camping equipment. Neither camper knew exactly what might happen if the flames spread further. Would something explode? Would the fire jump to their vehicle? Would they lose everything? Those questions raced through their minds while they fought to regain control. Thankfully, the extinguisher and water slowed the blaze before it could become completely unmanageable. Eventually, the flames died down, but when the smoke cleared, the scale of the damage became obvious. Large sections of the tent had been destroyed. Furniture had melted. Storage compartments were ruined. Fishing gear was warped by heat. Plastic equipment had fused together into blackened lumps. Even items that survived carried the smell and stains of smoke damage. Standing in front of the wreckage, the emotional impact finally hit. One camper struggled to hold back tears while looking at what remained of the setup they had carefully built only hours earlier. The scene was heartbreaking. And this is where the story takes on a much more serious tone. Sure, losing a tent and camping gear is frustrating, but try putting yourself in their position. The fire started while they were awake, alert, and able to react. What if that had happened in the middle of the night instead? What if nobody had noticed until the flames had already spread? Those are the questions that would keep most campers awake long after the trip was over, because once you start thinking about how close things came to being much worse, the burned equipment almost becomes secondary. As they cleaned up the remains of their camp, they searched for answers. The exact cause was never fully confirmed. Their suspicions centered around electrical equipment connected to an inverter system they had used for years without problems. That mystery only made the incident more unsettling. There was no obvious mistake, no reckless behavior, no dramatic warning beforehand. 1 minute they were enjoying breakfast beside the water, next they were fighting to save their campsite. In the end, the couple packed up what little could be salvaged and left the area. The trip was over. Their tent was destroyed. Much of their equipment was ruined. Their plans for a relaxing getaway had vanished in a cloud of smoke. But they drove away with something far more valuable than camping gear: perspective. Because when they looked back on that day, one fact overshadowed everything else. They lost a tent. They could have lost much more. A stranger tried to get inside her van in the middle of the night. For most van campers, a knock on the door late at night is enough to make their hearts skip a beat. Usually it's harmless. Maybe it's security, a curious passerby, or someone checking if the vehicle is occupied. But sometimes a single knock can become something far more unsettling. That's exactly what happened to solo van traveler Sarah during a stop in Asheville, North Carolina. Just days before the incident, everything had been going perfectly. Sarah had been enjoying time in nature with a close friend, exploring waterfalls and forests before continuing her journey alone.
Now, this is the kind of footage I like to see. And this essentially was what I was doing right beforehand, from 2 days prior when I retreated into the forest with my best friend. I enjoyed some magical waterfalls, garden grounding, and an overall recharging forest bath, which was really needed. But then we had to say a rather melancholic goodbye as we were parting ways for an uncertain amount of time.
Looking for cooler weather and a place to recharge, she arrived in Asheville and spent a couple of days exploring the city. The first night was uneventful. She parked overnight at a Cracker Barrel, a location often used by RV travelers and van lifers. There were other vehicles nearby, and she slept peacefully. The following evening, she chose a different Cracker Barrel on the other side of town. At first, nothing seemed unusual. She settled in for the night and started making dinner inside her van. As the restaurant closed, the parking lot slowly emptied. One vehicle after another left until Sarah realized she was almost completely alone.
I decided to park overnight at a different Cracker Barrel across the town, which seemed a little quieter with good Google reviews. The restaurant began closing and the parking lot slowly began emptying until I found myself alone in the middle of making dinner. I was totally in my own world when I heard an alarming knock.
Then came the knock. The sudden sound immediately caught her attention. At first, she assumed it might be an employee or perhaps law enforcement. Wanting to hear what was happening outside, she turned off her lights and listened carefully. But the voice she heard wasn't who she expected.
Know her, please leave me be.
A man outside began demanding that she come out of the van. According to Sarah, he claimed that a woman who worked at the restaurant had broken his heart and that she was somehow hiding inside her vehicle. The accusation made absolutely no sense. Sarah calmly told him he was mistaken. She explained that she was just a traveler passing through and had nothing to do with the person he was talking about.
He was complaining about a girl that worked at the Cracker Barrel and, it broke her heart and thought that she was in my van and was telling me to come out and prove that I wasn't her. And I was just proceeding to tell him, please leave me be. I am not who you think I am. I'm just an innocent traveler just passing through, and he says that he's seen my van there many times, which is definitely false.
The man didn't seem interested in listening. Instead of leaving, he continued talking and began moving around the van. He knocked on different doors and repeatedly tried to get her attention. That's when the situation became genuinely frightening. Sarah was completely alone in a nearly empty parking lot with a stranger who refused to leave. The longer the encounter continued, the more concerned she became. She later said she believed the man was intoxicated or under the influence of drugs, making it almost impossible to reason with him. Realizing the situation wasn't improving, she decided it was time to leave. Quickly but carefully, she began packing up her cooking equipment. Her propane stove was still set up, so she disconnected it, secured loose items, and prepared the van to move. All the while, the stranger remained outside. Rather than confront him, Sarah focused entirely on getting away safely. As soon as she was ready, she climbed into the driver's seat and pulled out of the parking lot. Only after putting some distance between herself and the man did she stop to think. Her adrenaline was surging. The encounter had only lasted a short time, but it felt much longer. She contacted law enforcement, provided a description of the individual, and then made another decision. She wasn't staying in Asheville, not that night. Even after she found another place to stay, the whole thing was still bothering her. Have you ever had one of those moments where something feels off and then hours later you're still replaying every detail in your head? That's pretty much where she was. Her dinner was sitting there getting cold because she wasn't thinking about food anymore. She was thinking about the stranger, the strange conversation, and all those what-ifs that come afterward. What if she'd stayed? What if she'd ignored her instincts? Those are the kinds of questions that can stick with you long after the actual encounter is over. Eventually, she decided to leave the city entirely and head toward the mountains. By the time she stopped for the night, she was miles away from Asheville and surrounded by wilderness. The following morning felt completely different.
So I didn't get much sleep that night, and when signs of sunrise came, I was beyond ecstatic. I was so grateful for my decision to drive so far away because I later found myself witnessing a special environment in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And although it was still cloudy, the light of day began to illuminate what was once a dark and scary night. The dawn brought beautiful sounds from the colorful birds that seemed like they belonged in a rainforest. So I sat there for a while, just witnessing, noticing the dancing clouds and the soothing sounds from this incredible forest.
The darkness and tension of the previous night were replaced by birdsong, mountain views, and daylight. For the first time since the encounter, she was finally able to relax. Looking back, Sarah believed the most important thing she did was remain calm. She didn't panic, she didn't argue, she didn't engage any more than necessary. Instead, she trusted her instincts and focused on creating distance between herself and a situation that felt wrong. And while the encounter ended without physical violence, that's exactly what makes it so disturbing, because it serves as a reminder that when you're traveling alone, danger doesn't always arrive with obvious warning signs. Sometimes it starts with a simple knock on the door. Now, before we get into the next story, I want to take a moment to thank every single one of you for being here. The support on these videos has been incredible, and I never, ever take it for granted. As usual, I'd love to see where everyone's watching from, so take a second, drop the flag of your country in the comments. It's amazing to see people from all over the world coming together to share their love of camping, van life, and outdoor adventures. And if you're enjoying the video but haven't subscribed yet, consider joining the community. It really does help the channel grow and allows me to keep bringing you more stories just like these. Don't forget to turn on notifications too so you don't miss future uploads. Now, all that said, let's get back to the video. A solo snow camping trip turned into a terrifying nighttime attack. After spending weeks refining his compact car camping setup, this creator was finally ready for a winter adventure. The goal was simple: build a cozy mobile shelter capable of handling freezing temperatures in the mountains. His original setup had two major flaws. There was no safe heating solution, and cooking required stepping outside into the snow. Determined to fix both problems, he completely redesigned the interior of his vehicle. He rebuilt the sleeping platform, created storage compartments, installed a countertop, upgraded the battery system, added a portable power station, and even modified the rear hatch so it could be opened from inside the vehicle. Everything seemed carefully planned. Water storage, refrigeration, cooking equipment, emergency supplies, and even a heating system were accounted for. By the time the project was finished, the vehicle looked less like a car and more like a tiny cabin on wheels. With preparations complete, he headed into the snowy wilderness. The conditions were beautiful. Snow-covered landscapes stretched in every direction, creating exactly the kind of peaceful winter camping experience he had hoped for. As night fell, he settled into the vehicle and began transforming the small space into a warm refuge from the cold. Window covers went up for privacy, the heater was turned on to combat the freezing temperatures, a gas monitor and fire extinguisher sat nearby as safety precautions. Everything appeared under control. Then came dinner. Using a compact propane stove installed on the countertop, he prepared an unexpectedly elaborate meal. Toasted bread, vegetables, rice, and lobster tail all came together inside the tiny vehicle. The setup worked surprisingly well. The stove even helped warm the interior, making the space feel comfortable despite the freezing weather outside. After finishing the meal, he settled in for a relaxing evening. A hot drink was prepared. Dessert followed. The atmosphere couldn't have been more peaceful. But that calm would not last. Suddenly, a vehicle approached. At first, there was nothing obviously alarming about another car arriving in the area. However, the situation changed almost immediately.
Hey! Hello, who is this? Can I help you? Hey! What can I do for you?
Open the door!
How may I help you?
Open the door!
I'm not going to be able to do that.
Hey, what are you doing?
The stranger wasn't behaving like someone seeking help or asking a simple question. The tone of his voice had become increasingly hostile, and the situation was escalating rapidly. Realizing this was no longer a normal interaction, the camper immediately started preparing to leave. From the back of the vehicle, he reached forward and started the engine. The stranger became even more aggressive. According to the creator, the man began pounding on the vehicle while continuing to shout demands. The flashlight remained aimed at him, preventing him from clearly seeing what was happening outside. The problem was that he parked on frozen ground. When he tried to drive away, the tires initially failed to gain traction. For several terrifying moments, the vehicle remained stuck. Meanwhile, the stranger continued advancing. Then things became violent. The man ripped away the mesh covering one of the windows and began striking the glass harder and harder. Moments later, the window shattered. Glass exploded inward. Fragments sprayed directly into the camper's face. Fortunately, at nearly the exact same moment the window broke, the vehicle's tires finally gained traction. The car lurched forward. He managed to maneuver around the stranger's vehicle, squeeze through the narrow opening, and escape. Only after putting distance between himself and the scene did he realize he'd been injured. His left eye had been struck by flying glass. The damage was serious enough to require medical treatment. Later examinations revealed that shards of glass had scratched his eyeball, temporarily affecting his vision. Thankfully, the injury eventually improved with treatment. When you think back to how this story started, the ending almost feels hard to believe. A few hours earlier, he was cooking dinner, enjoying the snow, and showing viewers around the camping setup he'd worked so hard to build. Then, in a matter of moments, everything changed. Thankfully, his eye recovered over time, but the reason behind the attack remains a mystery. Whatever the strangers' intentions were, the result was the same. A peaceful camping trip became a nightmare scenario that ended with shattered glass, a painful injury, and a hurried escape into the darkness. For him, it was a chilling reminder that even the most carefully planned camping adventures can change in an instant when the wrong person appears out of the darkness. The midnight attack that forced them to flee. For most of the day, everything had gone exactly as planned. While traveling Scotland's famous North Coast 500 route, a van life couple had discovered what seemed like the perfect overnight stop. Surrounded by beautiful scenery and far from the crowds, it looked like the ideal place to relax, recharge, and enjoy another peaceful evening on the road. The day itself was uneventful. They explored the nearby town, stocked up on supplies, and returned to their campsite with plans to stay a second night. The weather eventually turned rainy, so they settled into the van, cooked a simple meal, and spent the evening discussing future upgrades for their camper setup. Nothing felt unusual. In fact, by the time darkness arrived, they were already winding down for the night. The rain tapped against the van, they watched a movie, and eventually drifted off to sleep, believing they had found another safe location along their journey.
As you can see, it's raining. It's been raining for a while, so we've just been sat in the van. So we did say we're going to have like a nice easy meal tonight, so kind of glad that we are now. So I'm going to make some noodles, nice and simple. So we're going to make some food, and then we've got a really good Wi-Fi signal here, haven't we? So I think we're going to watch a film, aren't we?
But at around 2 o'clock in the morning, everything changed. At first, one of them woke to loud noises outside, then came shouting. Within seconds, it became clear that whoever was outside wasn't simply passing through. A group of people had approached the van and were behaving aggressively.
Well, as you can see, this is not where we went to sleep last night. During the night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, some people turned up Wales Park, and they weren't doing anything wrong, but they were loud. I mean, loud. It woke me and Brooke up and Thor, and we couldn't get back to sleep, could we? So we just decided we need to move on. So we just drove a little bit out, about half an hour, and then we found a lay-by just to get a few more hours sleep. Now we're up bright and early.
The couple later revealed that they deliberately left many of the details out of their original video because the experience had been so unsettling. What they initially described as some noisy people was actually something far more serious. According to them, the group knew the van was occupied, and they were trying to get inside. The sudden realization sent panic through the vehicle.
Now the truth is, at 2 o'clock in the morning, whilst we were asleep, we actually got attacked while we was in the van. Now, I'm normally sort of like when I'm asleep, you know, any little noise I wake up, but...
And I'm dead to the world. But it was the opposite way around this time.
Yeah, I was like in a deep sleep, and then the next thing I heard Brooke screaming, and then as I woke up, I could hear... Now, I'm not going to go into details, but one thing that I will say is, these people were trying to get in the van. They knew there was someone in the van, and they was being very aggressive, and the things that they were saying for us to get out the van.
One of the occupants woke up to screams while the other was already trying to understand what was happening outside. The shouting grew more aggressive, and it became obvious that the people surrounding the van weren't interested in a friendly conversation. They wanted the occupants to come out. The threats and demands became increasingly hostile. The couple chose not to publicly repeat everything that was said that night, but they admitted the language and behavior were intimidating enough to make them genuinely fear for their safety. As the situation escalated, the male occupant jumped from the bed and rushed to respond. In the chaos, he accidentally broke part of the van's television mount while grabbing equipment and preparing for a possible confrontation. Years of professional conflict management training suddenly became more than just a qualification on paper. It became something he had to rely on. Realizing the situation was becoming dangerous, he took decisive action. The moment he confronted the individuals outside, the atmosphere shifted. The group apparently hadn't expected resistance. Almost immediately, they backed off. Then they ran.
I opened the door, I got out, and like very quickly, this group of people realised that it was a mistake to continue what they was doing. and they ran off basically. Like I said, there's a bit more to it, but we're not going to go into details.
Just like that, the people who had moments earlier been attempting to intimidate the occupants disappeared into the darkness. But even though the immediate danger was gone, the night was far from over. The couple remained shaken. Nearby campers had heard the commotion and came over to check on them after hearing the shouting. One neighboring camper, a woman traveling with her grandson, had witnessed enough of the disturbance to become concerned herself.
When we got back in the van, obviously we needed to calm down a little bit. There was actually a camper van that was next to us, and you know, there was just like a lady
and her grandson.
Yeah, and they heard like everything that was going on, and they obviously got out like what's going on, and you know, explained everything. So they was like a bit worried. So we made a decision. We rang the police, not thinking that the police are going to come and they're going to like go and find them or anything. It's just they had to be made aware, didn't they? So we did the right thing. We rang the police, and they said they'll send a patrol out to look in the area and everything, and all that. So you know, so we did sort of like report it.
After discussing what had happened, the couple contacted the police. They weren't necessarily expecting officers to track down the people responsible, but they felt the incident needed to be officially reported. Authorities agreed to send patrols to the area. That left the couple with a difficult decision. Should they end their trip and go home? Should they remain where they were and hope nothing else happened? Or should they leave immediately? In the end, they chose the third option. You know what's really unsettling about this story? For me, the most disturbing part isn't that they left in the middle of the night. It's the fact that this seemed to come completely out of nowhere. They weren't doing anything unusual. They were parked in a spot where people regularly stayed overnight, and after years of van life, they've never had a problem like this before. That's what makes it so disturbing. It wasn't the kind of situation where you can easily point to a mistake and say, well, that's what went wrong. From their perspective, it was just a normal evening that suddenly took a very ugly turn. And I think that's the part that would stay with most people long after the incident was over. Their message afterward was simple. Stay aware, take precautions, and trust your instincts, but don't allow one bad encounter to stop you from living the life you want. For them, the trip continued. But that terrifying knock in the middle of the Scottish night became a reminder that even the most peaceful campsites can sometimes hide unexpected dangers. A stranger's visit in the desert took a terrifying turn. For full-time van lifer Alyssa Van Lanningham, a quiet night in the Arizona desert was supposed to be a chance to escape the heat, recharge her batteries, and enjoy some much-needed solitude. Instead, it became one of the most unsettling experiences of her life. At the time, Alyssa was camping on remote public land outside Tucson. She had stayed in the area before and considered it relatively safe. The location was popular with seasonal travelers during the winter months, but because temperatures were still hovering around 100 degrees, almost nobody else was around. That isolation initially felt like a blessing. After spending several days in town dealing with appointments and errands, she wanted a break from crowded parking lots and city noise. She parked near the only trees she could find, set up her solar panels, organized her laundry, and settled in for what she expected would be a peaceful evening. Then, a man arrived on an ATV.
Oh, okay. Are you a ranger or?
No, I just live close.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of come out and check, make sure, because I know there's a lot of people that come out here that don't have a lot.
The stranger approached and introduced himself as a local resident. He claimed he regularly drove through the area checking on campers to make sure they had enough water and supplies. He asked Alyssa a few questions about her travels and lifestyle before telling her that if she ever needed water, a shower, or assistance, she could stop by his property nearby. The conversation was unusual, but not immediately alarming. Still, something felt slightly off. The man seemed eager to explain himself, offering long stories that didn't quite connect to the questions being asked. He mentioned having items stolen from his home years earlier and claimed that was the reason he now checked on strangers camping in the desert. Eventually, he left. Alyssa returned to her chores, though she had already started considering moving somewhere else. She couldn't point to a specific threat, but her instincts were beginning to whisper that something wasn't right. A short time later, the man returned. The second encounter changed everything.
Hey,
Hi.
so you have a guy
Uh-huh.
on the mountain up there that is watching you with binoculars.
Okay, well, that's unnerving. Well, I guess I won't be staying.
Well, it's not that you can't stay.
He approached her again and delivered a startling warning. According to him, there was another man parked on a nearby mountain who had been watching her through binoculars. The stranger pointed toward a distant truck and claimed its owner had been observing her from above. He repeatedly encouraged her to pay attention to the vehicle and remember its appearance. The story immediately raised questions. How did he know what the other man was supposedly doing? Why was he so focused on convincing her that someone else was the threat? And perhaps most importantly, why did the explanation sound remarkably similar to his own behavior? After all, he had already admitted to driving around, observing campers, and deciding who might need help. The more he talked, the more uncomfortable Alyssa became. His pauses grew longer. His staring became harder to ignore. At one point, he simply sat near her van without saying much at all, watching her as she continued putting away laundry. The atmosphere became increasingly tense. When he finally left, Alyssa made her decision. She wasn't staying. Within minutes, she began packing everything as quickly as possible. Solar panels were folded away, equipment was thrown into the van, window coverings came down. She abandoned the campsite and drove back toward town without looking back. Only later, after replaying the encounters in her mind, the situation became even more disturbing. And honestly, this is the point where the whole story starts feeling really off. The man claimed he was checking on campers and offering water, yet he didn't have any water with him. Then he came back and started talking about someone else supposedly watching her, even though it sounded a lot like the same behavior he'd already described himself doing. And maybe there really was another person on that mountain. Maybe there wasn't. But what matters is that Alyssa felt something wasn't right, and she trusted that feeling. And sometimes the most unsettling encounters aren't the ones where something happens. It's the one where you've been left wondering what might have happened if you hadn't left. Sometimes they're the moments when every warning bell in your mind starts ringing at once, and you realize that the smartest thing you can do is trust your gut and get out before finding out what happens next. For Alyssa, that decision may have been the difference between an unsettling story and something far worse. And that wraps up today's collection of stories. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. If you're new here, consider subscribing and turning on notifications because there are plenty more camping, van life, and outdoor mystery stories still to come. And if you're in the mood for one more case, you won't have to look far. There should be another video waiting for you on the screen right now. Click it, keep watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe out there.